Welcome to techCast, the podcast that quenches curiosity, powered by QNA Marcom. techCast, where we deep dive into the exciting world of technology, bringing you the latest trends, innovations, and thought-provoking discussions. Join us on this exciting journey as we explore the boundless possibilities of technology.
Hi, Patrick. So I'm Phil Westgarth. I'm the CISO for Network International. Network International is one of the biggest payments companies in the Middle East and Africa. We look after over 250 financial institutions and 160,000 merchants across the group. I'm really pleased to meet you and to talk about generative AI and cybersecurity, which I know is a topic that's close to your heart as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, Bill, lovely to meet you too. Patrick Ramseyer, originally Irish, half Swiss, hence the second name, Ramseyer. Been in Dubai for about 4 years. I guess you could say my first exposure to AI was back in the 80s. I don't know if you remember the movie War Games.
Yeah.
Do you remember that scene at the end where they got the computer to play X's and O's against each other?
Yeah.
And this was my first introduction to kind of machine learning. You know, I said, okay, the machine had to actually learn. I was only 14, giving away my age now. The machine had to actually learn that, you know, this scenario where this guy had hacked into NORAD and, you know, was sending the Russian missiles against the American missiles, and it actually played out in real time.
Yeah.
That the machine had to figure out that there was no way anybody could win.
Yeah, tic-tac.
So that was tic-tac-toe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Noughts and crosses, some people call it. So that was my first introduction into AI, and I've kind of been monitoring it for many years since. And I enjoyed films like Terminator and, you know, when the machines started to learn and all that sort of stuff. So it's always been at the back of my mind, and I did a bit of programming in the day, and you know, I had a lot of exposure to it to AI throughout my career, and I've just noticed the differences that have come out over the last, you know, particularly last 2 years.
Well, I think that's a really important point, because I think actually loads of people everything's talking about Gen AI now, and AI is this huge buzzword, but it's been around forever. We've been using machine learning forever.
Yeah.
So in our payments company, everything we do is built on computer rules, you know, basic code.
Yeah.
So 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah. If and when.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of those artifacts that we built our programs on, we built all our systems on, are all machine learning.
Yeah, exactly. And you see, this is something that I see, you know, unfortunately, as a cybersecurity vendor, okay, we are seeing it right across the board. Everybody's coming up. We have AI.
Yeah.
You know, we have AI. Yeah. What do you mean you have AI? What's AI to you? You know, what's AI to a vendor? You know, what does it mean to you? What does it make your job easier? Your customers' jobs easier. But here's the thing. AI is powered by, in my opinion, and obviously it's powered by data.
Yep.
So if you're a vendor, for example, in, say, data classification, okay, and you want to create a machine learning model or based on AI that, you know, will recognize GDPR specific or HIPAA specific or PCI DSS specific data. How do you do that?
Yeah.
You need tons and tons and tons and tons of data, and you need to tweak it.
Yeah.
So this is what you're saying. You're dead right. You know, is AI if and when, or is it this new generative AI?
But I think that's the biggest thing, is actually one of the biggest foundational points that we need to get right for anybody using AI, in the same way anybody using machine learning, is you need to get your data structure right.
Yeah.
So it's just built on data. It's just making sure that, so for payments cards, for example, making sure that the payments card that you're using matches with the bank account that we're going to take the withdrawal from, and then make sure that the payments flow goes all the way through to the schemes. And that is just teaching a computer model how to make a transaction.
Yeah.
That's been in existence forever. That's not
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think the new concept is about this generative AI, where everyone's now worried about you know, deep fakes and making sure that I'm not actually who I am. So the threats to an organization like ours from cybersecurity, new threats through to generative AI, are things like deep fakes or clever phishing emails. Because if you think about the phishing emails of the past, you could easily identify there was a phishing email because it was spelt incorrectly or the grammar didn't make sense. Or, well, actually, generative AI now will fix that for you as the hacker to make sure that it now is correctly worded.
Yeah, you've just hit on a great point. You see how everybody's talking about AI and cybersecurity, you know, how it benefits us, right? But I worked with an intelligent NDR vendor, we call it, back about a year ago. And they had a very nice AI engine, okay? But it was based on their own data and so on. And I always, when I was doing keynote speakers, speeches or whatever, I always said, it's a double-edged sword. Because you just said, the hacker can now do this.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, you probably heard the story about this Chinese guy, right, who got a phone call from his friend asking him to transfer money, and it was his friend's voice, and it was completely responsive, everything like that. And particularly with ChatGPT 4 that's coming out now, which has the ability to create voice and answer in less than 232 milliseconds.
Yeah.
It actually gives you the ability to talk like a human to a machine. And a machine talks back to you as a human with your own voice, and that is incredibly risky.
Yeah.
Because it bypasses all the need for voice recognition that's been out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to drop out all of that. But the point you made that I really like is this technology is available to hackers too.
Yeah.
You see, and then we get into a totally different kettle of fish, all about regulation.
Yeah.
In the EU, they're already trying to regulate or starting to regulate AI.
Yep.
I don't know how they're going to do it.
Well, here in the UE, they've got that, AI is one of our they've got the first minister for AI.
Yes.
We're actually driving forward with the use of AI in everything we do, which is brilliant, but it comes at a risk to us all as well. So we need to make sure that we've got the controls in place in each of the companies like ours, which provide payments services, to make sure that we've got the controls in place so that you can't fake someone's voice to be the authentication for making a payment, which is why things like multi-factor authentication are so important, making sure that you have a one-time password that you need to put in that kind of gets text to you. That multi-factor authentication is going to help us to be able to protect ourselves. Just having a single biometric face ID, which actually could be stolen from the internet now and faked, or a voice, which actually from ChatGPT 4 you could steal as well. These are threats to us, but the way to get around them we already have as well. We have the controls with multi-factor authentication. We just to make sure we're using those controls effectively throughout that payments chain to make sure that we're not losing lots of money through fraud.
Yeah. As a CISO, right, how do you, just for my own curiosity, obviously, how do you see AI making your job easier?
Yeah, I think the biggest use case for me is about the machine learning model, which we already kind of have in everything we do. So I have loads of different data sets. I have all of my inventories of different hardware assets, software assets. I have my SOC monitoring tools, I have my antivirus tools, I have my endpoint detection response tools, I have my DDoS protection tools, all of these different tools. Bringing all of those together, all that data together into one data repository to be able to be more intelligent about the decisions that I make in terms of where controls are applied and not applied, that's the biggest power to me. I think bringing that data together, harnessing the power of that data, because it's just faster. So we already do a bit of it, but we can be even better with it if we use AI effectively.
Yeah, and this is where I see it as being very beneficial for CISOs. Absolutely, because you've got your internal systems, and what you've got is an overview of those. So, that'll allow you to correlate the information from your EDR, from your DLP and whatever, and you could see if you're using a network detection and response, you could say, okay, there's extra traffic coming in over this port from Russia, better check that out. But that's actually already done, but that's not AI. That's done using what you mentioned earlier on, if and when, and 1 + 1 = 2. So if I'm seeing on my machine, for example, if my EDR is reporting there's 2 pieces of malware on this box, and then there's extraordinary activity to a website in Russia here, then what should be happening is my system, my SIEM, should be correlating.
Absolutely, and that's machine learning.
Yeah,
and that basic machine learning that we've got already exists today.
Yeah.
But it can get faster with the new technology that exists. But it's not generative AI. It's just basic AI. It's artificial intelligence, machine learning, which I think is the biggest thing. Everybody's selling as, this is new AI. AI is a brand new concept. It isn't. It's in the SIEM solutions that we've had.
No, it's been around for decades.
Exactly.
It has. I mean, if anybody did any coding, they'll know if and when. So if I see a credit card number on a document, then classify this as a PCI.
Absolutely.
That's not AI.
But the speed of that ability for the machine to learn,
Precisely.
that's the thing that's coming faster and faster for us.
When I worked with a classification vendor, one of the problems that we actually had was, in order to create these models, okay, they had a very, very complex procedure on how to do it. Okay, so what you had to do, what you had to do is you had to look at the file, and then you had to convert it into a very specific algorithm, right? And it created more or less a 4D model of that file,
Yeah.
and sent it down to a server to analyze it. And it was just looked like gibberish. Basically, it was like an encrypted file. But
Yeah.
It made no sense to anybody. But that's what these models do. And I think that type of AI, the problem we were confronted with was we couldn't get enough data. You know, you look at GPT 3.5, it's something like 170 billion parameters were used to teach the model, you know, and the amount of computing power that you need to actually crunch those models, it's incredible.
I think the data classification is really one of our biggest steps that we need to take foundational steps we need to take before we then get to using any type of AI tool. Because we need to know what the data structure looks like. So we think about classifying a Word document. So the use of generative AI can look through that Word document and pull out whether it is a card number or is someone's phone number. You can tell from the context of the sentence. That's really useful to me. What I don't want is that document to be sent somewhere else across the world in order to come back to tell me.
Well, that's why they stopped using in the federal government in the United States. What's the new thing from Microsoft called again?
Copilot.
Copilot.
Yeah.
Precisely for that reason.
Well, the great thing about Copilot is that Microsoft has tweaked Copilot to be just in your own tenant. So when they first launched it, the idea was going to be send all to one massive repository. These things called large language models. So the LLMs, these large language models, are what OpenAI and ChatGPT are built on. It goes back to one massive data center where there's 46,000 million different parameters, and the model is learning constantly from everything you ask it. I don't want that. So for my area, I don't want any of my data from the UAE going to America, going to Europe in order that I don't know about.
Well,
so
with regulations don't allow it.
Correct. Absolutely. And I need to be really careful of that. Those regulations are really useful for me, but actually it's dependent on the vendors like Microsoft to give us an opportunity to use a tool that just stays in-house, which is exactly what we have today. So the use of AI can be controlled if we work with the right vendors, the people who sell us the tools, to make sure the data doesn't go out elsewhere. But I think that's the use of large language models that we need to be careful about. It is a regulatory breach accidentally by using a clever tool.
Yeah, I mean, you know, even though you might send it in encrypted format to a server over in the United States to get decrypted and, you know, classified, and you know, I always said, you know, as soon as the cloud really takes off, okay, I remember 2012, there was a survey done with Swiss CIOs. I was in Switzerland at the time, and they were asked, would they consider keeping their data in the cloud? Only 9% at the time said they would. Okay. Now, 2024, 12 years later, I'd say 90% in the cloud. Why? Microsoft had to go and build data centers in Switzerland. They said, we can't allow our data out of Switzerland. You can imagine a Swiss bank, data in Germany or data in, you know, America. No, not going to happen. So if we go back to the AI aspect of having this data, I mean, we see from, as I work as a vendor, you know, what we really need to talk about there is how much access to data have these cybersecurity vendors. This is the point. And, you know, it doesn't matter which cybersecurity vendor. They all have their own customer base, and certainly they can benefit from the data that those customers have. But I don't know if they can train models with them. Some do, some can't. One of the vendors that I'm working with, they have a very, very powerful system. It's a secure email gateway, and they have the benefit of billions of emails going through their system for the last, 25 years. Literally. And they just talk about AI. They have this machine learning model there. They have this, a large language model that you're referring to. And they also have a team full of people sitting in a room, literally in a large office, going through this data. And not going through people's individual emails, but tweaking the system. So in other words, you know, if you have a ransomware attack in Japan, you know, the guys in America want to know about it immediately.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's this correlation of data that I'm talking about. So,
well, we saw with the cloud service providers the risk of, you know, one with the CrowdStrike incident that occurred recently.
Yeah,
we saw one cloud service provider actually being able to disrupt, you know, globally. So I think what we just need to be aware of when we're using all of these tools, whether it's one single email gateway that's got everyone's emails going through it, is actually making sure we have resilience within those vendors. So we know that actually not one vendor can disrupt all of our services at any one time, or not one vendor has access to all of our data at any one time. And I think understanding your data, understanding your data classification, who has what data where and where it's going, is actually how you make best use of machine learning and AI, and therefore whether you use generative AI or not. It's understanding what you've already got within your data, which is basics.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you see but that opens up another can of worms. You know why? Because you've got a ton, everyone has a ton of legacy data. You know, and I have been asked by so many cybersecurity consultants, Patrick, please get us something that discovers data properly, properly, and classifies it and categorizes it. And I'm thinking, that's the holy grail.
It is the holy grail, but it doesn't exist yet.
It doesn't exist.
And maybe one day it will, now that we have generative AI, but it doesn't exist today. Therefore, it's really incumbent upon the company, the user, the organization, to make sure that they can classify their data and what is really, really important. Because there is, under GDPR, which you mentioned before, the right to be forgotten.
Yeah.
So if you want to be forgotten from my system, I need to be able to find every record that relates to you and be able to delete that within a certain amount of time.
Certainly, 30 days, actually.
It can be very difficult for me to do that with the amount of legacy data that some companies have. Because if you haven't got control of all of that legacy data to start with, inventoried it properly, made sure you could classify it properly and find your name, well, then I don't know where to start. But Gen AI can give us that ability. We can now start scanning documents to find any reference to you.
Your name, your date of birth, your PII, personal identifiable information, but your social security number in the States and so on. But then you got the other problem. I don't envy a CISO in this day and age because there's a lot of problems that you have to address. You've got your unstructured data and your structured data. Structured data, there are systems out there which will find absolutely all of that and do a very, very good job. But it's the unstructured data and the scanned in documents. I'll give you an example. We were approached by a very, very large department in one of the Middle Eastern countries, a justice department, and they had billions of scanned documents that they wanted to digitize and classify. All right. Now, these were in various formats, JPEG, PDF, and this and that as well. But this was all crucial personal information, and they wanted it all classified, and they wanted it done in such a way that, it could be protected. Because you have to protect all that old legacy.
Absolutely.
Too. So this is, when we see here in the Middle East, you have changes afoot. You've got the National Cybersecurity Authority in Saudi, obviously. People like SAMA, people like SIDAIA, all these regulatory bodies coming up in Qatar, in Bahrain, here in the UAE as well. It was announced with the 50 for 50 initiative when the country was 50 years old a couple of years ago. Part of it was data privacy. And one of the things that AI opens up is a whole privacy discussion. Because what we've got is, you've got my data, your data, everybody's data being used to generate these models. Well, where is it ending up? And in what format? And you see, this is why I read an article lately where one of my previous colleagues said that trying to regulate AI is, basically it's a no-go, it's a non-starter.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think here in the UAE, we've made really good strides in trying to get regulation for AI, because I think the most important thing we need to do is to make sure that we understand what those risks are for AI.
Yeah.
And I think here, through the National Cybersecurity Council, they actually are starting to think about how do we get that regulation right to make sure that AI can only be used where we have a benefit to the consumer.
Yes.
Where we have a use case that actually makes sense. But we've been using AI for a long time. As you said before, machine learning and AI is not new.
Yeah.
It's only this new generative AI where you're creating something from nothing or from previous data that actually, and making sure that that is done in-house, in the country, and not sent off to somewhere else that you lose control of your data.
Yeah.
That's basic data security, data protection that we've had for a long time. The new UA data protection regulations, which will come in at some point, those new regulations will help us to enforce that across banks, supermarkets, retails, hotels. You know, if you think about all these different places in the country where your phone number is used, your Emirates ID is used, all these data points. Well, actually, things like UAE Pass, which is the way for us to use facial recognition to be able to enter all of these government departments, that's a really powerful way for us to stop having to enter so many times our Emirates ID into it, because we've got one central repository of who we are as an identity, as who we are as a person, and that is then used to open up lots of different routes into different applications.
Yeah, I completely concur, because before I came to Dubai in 2020, just post-COVID, I was in Switzerland for 16 years. And I can tell you from a government digital transformation perspective, you know, the UAE is years ahead. Years ahead.
Yeah.
And it's surprising, you know, I think it's down to the fact that there's not as much red tape here as there is. They can implement change when necessary a lot faster.
Yep.
And to benefit people. Certainly AI does need to be regulated, the use of AI. However, like with anything, you know, there's always going to be the dark side, the criminal side. And unfortunately, you can't regulate criminals.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be criminals. So this is I see, we have to be careful not to stifle creativity in AI, because there is a certain amount of human input that needs to be there in order to combat what criminals are doing.
I totally agree, and I think actually going back to the conversation we had before about war games back in the 1980s, that computer model, that artificial intelligence, the machine learning, that already exists.
Yes.
What we're looking to do is grow that sensibly using human intervention to make sure that we are controlling it, that we do understand where the data is going, that we do understand what the use case for that data being used in a model is, and that model is giving us the right answer. Because what you could find yourself doing is accidentally using a machine learning Gen AI model which gives you an answer. But if you don't know whether that answer is right or wrong, then, and you have no insight into what the model is doing,
the internet said it. Must mean it's true.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of the fears. And therefore, we need to make sure, as an organization,
positives.
As an organization using AI, we need to make sure that we understand what the answer could be.
Yeah.
What are the parameters around the answer that we'll get? We should know that if we ask the machine to give us the top 10 most used cards in a supermarket, that we're not getting phone numbers back.
Yeah.
We should know what we're expecting as the answer from the model.
Precisely. It should be more a validation of what you already know. But this is why, you know, they're trying to stop kids using ChatGPT for their essays or something like that, because you need to know yourself. I mean, where's the best place to learn? The library, obviously. You know, still in this day and age, you know, internet. Okay, you can look at the internet, or you can Google something, and you know, it might be right, might be wrong.
Yep.
And people are learning from Instagram and places like that.
I think that's a really important point, that actually, are we using Gen AI, are we going to use Gen AI for the right things?
Yeah.
Because actually, do we really want essays written for my son's history project by a computer rather than by him? No, because he hasn't learned the actual topic himself. But actually, can I create the framework of a policy in Gen AI for the use of Gen AI, for example, and then use that framework that I've been given by the computer, then tweak and make it fit for purpose for me? Absolutely, why not? That's that's good use of the computer to give me, these are the top 10 things you need to think about when you're creating a framework for generative AI. Let's ask generative AI what the top 10 things they've been asked about the threats to generative AI are.
Yeah.
But it'll give us an answer, because everyone's asking the same question. How can I safely use generative AI? We could put that into the machine itself and it'll give us an answer back.
Yeah.
So we need to use it effectively as a library of information, like we put things into Google.
It should be reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Rather than the foundation for things.
Yeah.
It's not a decision-making tool, it's a support tool.
Precisely. And that's one of the things that I know one particular vendor here, a cybersecurity vendor, a very smart one, that are building in that very specific thing that you spoke about earlier on, having an overview. So they want to talk to their system and they say, literally, at the moment it's type. So say, please let me know where my highest risks are in my environment today.
Yep. I have a huge library of vulnerabilities. So I know where all the vulnerabilities exist within, so my CVE numbers of all the vulnerabilities exist within my infrastructure.
Yeah.
I can now correlate those CVEs against what type of computer or what kind of system I'm actually, that vulnerability exists on. How easy it is to breach. Has it been breached? Has it been exploited elsewhere by a different attacker? Are there known threat vectors that I can pull all of that together into one suite of tools using machine learning and artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
So it's a hugely powerful tool for me.
Absolutely.
But it does bring risks to me.
It does bring risks because, like we just said, how can you rely on it? Maybe it missed something. Maybe there's a smart hacker who knows, how to get around that. And obviously, we, no matter what, you as a CISO know as well as I do, the biggest risk in the chain is the human element.
Yeah.
And the weakest link in the chain is the human element. And that's something AI can't compensate for. I mean, we've done in the past phishing exercises where we've literally thrown the USB stick in the car park and said, executives, bonus scheme for 2024 or 2022 or whatever it was, and somebody picks up, stick it in their laptop, and it's okay. You can compromise that by, you can compensate for that by disabling USB ports, but still people do it. They'll bring it home and they'll,
Absolutely. I think phishing is one of those areas where I was having that conversation just yesterday at work about how important is the click rate now to me. Well, the click rate is how many people in my organization actually click on the phishing email that are sent. I base my defenses on the fact that somebody will click. So I know that somebody out there, doesn't matter how much security education I put into the organization, somebody will eventually click on something.
For sure.
So I need to presume that has already occurred. So tracking the click rate is less important to me than tracking the reporting rate. Because if I want to understand how effective is my security education awareness and training, then the way to test that is to understand how many of the phishing emails that I send in as a simulation are actually reported as phishing. If I've got 95% of my organization able to identify that that's a phishing email, but I've got 5% who still click on it, actually that's a successful campaign for me, because my 95% of my population were able to not just identify it, but report it effectively using the right tool.
Well, yeah, exactly. You've got 95% of your people are aware, which is an extremely good statistic for any business, because most people don't care. And then you always have a risk element of disgruntled employees who just click it for the sake of clicking.
But it only takes 1%.
Only takes
one person to click on the email and got the infection. So I need to expect that these phishing emails will be successful. And even more now with generative AI, they're going to be even more successful. Because they're going to make them look more realistic. They're going to use the power of generative AI to make them look more realistic to my users. They're going to be able to do social engineering on those users. They're going to be able to. So I have to expect that will occur. Now putting the controls in place to make sure that it doesn't infect my systems. Doesn't matter how, and I guess that's the learning for me from generative AI is one of the biggest threats we talk about is better phishing campaigns, whale campaigns to the. But I have to expect that they're going to be successful anyway. So therefore I can mitigate that biggest risk to me, the clever phishing emails, by actually making sure the controls post the click happening are in place.
I mean, I still think last statistic I read was that over 70% of attacks originate still through email.
Yeah.
And it's phishing, or malware being passed through, not even being downloaded, coming straight.
Yeah. So somebody's surfing to the internet to a malicious site, not knowing what they're doing, and the instruction on the website is, in order to run this game, this application, please press Control-R, copy and paste, and then paste. So that means I've just opened the run command, copied and pasted something into the run command, and pressed enter. So I'm now running a program within my organization in the background without really knowing what to do. But now I've got the computer game open, so I don't really care. Or I've got the website open, or I've got the advert open. All of that exists today. So Gen AI is just making that more user-friendly for the attacker, more able for them to have the tools in their toolbox to be able to attack me. But I need to make sure that my controls are in place. Once that thing has occurred, once the phishing email's been clicked on, or the malicious website's been accessed, I need to have the controls in place to protect me then. Because the breach has already occurred.
It's like the layered effect.
Absolutely.
Last thing you want is to get, so I always liken it to a prison. There's no point in locking a guy in the center of the prison if he can drill down out, down through the ground and out, get a tunnel out. The point I suppose I'm trying to make there is you can have all the controls in place, but unless they catch the stuff that's on the inside, that's the hardest thing to do. It reminds me of a story I told actually at a presentation last year. I read up on this group of Korean scientists in some university, and what they did was basically they scanned the dark web and the dark net, and they crunched all the data together, they correlated it all, and they came up, I can't remember the name of the project, I'll send it to you after, but the project is well documented. There's about a 45-page report on it, where they got all the data and they were able to enter into a command in a similar to ChatGPT. How do I hack XYZ limit? And then it gives you the thing. This is the way to do it. This vulnerability is there, that vulnerability is there, and this is from a hacker's perspective. Now you have ransomware as a service, hacking as a service. It's all there.
Absolutely. And that's where the power of generative AI is going to make this more available to less people, to more people. So less equipped teams of people will now have more powerful tools.
Precisely.
But I have to protect against the powerful tools anyway.
So years ago, you were looking at facing up against an army of people sitting in maybe North Korea or China, or a state-sponsored attack or whatever on your technical infrastructure. And these guys were spending 24/7, a huge team of them trying to breach, and they became, particularly the state-sponsored ones. They were particularly what would you say, active, and it's like a war going on. The next war is not going to be about oil. It's going to be about data. That's it. Literally. And it's already going on.
I think for us within cybersecurity, thinking about how we use generative AI, I think we've got the right tools in place to be able to put the controls in. The controls already exist because AI is not a new concept, as we talked about from 1984 War Games film. It's AI and machine learning is not new. We've had it for a long time. It's been more advertised now in the last few years, and it gives us more power because the computers are more powerful. But actually, it's been around for a while. We have the right controls in place. We can secure our organizations. We need to make sure we understand what data we have, what data is being shared in order to teach models, where that data is going, so that we then can make sure that we're securing the right parts of our data at the right time, and not allowing a major breach to occur that then can.
So what you're really, what I'm taking from this is, there's a requirement for a silver bullet. Okay, when it comes to generative AI, from a security perspective, to correlate all this information automatically together, but be extremely reliable. Okay, now if you consider Microsoft are spending $5 billion a year just on cybersecurity R&D, which is great, I think. It's particularly, but it's a lot to do with the cloud and everything as well. But let's go back to the CrowdStrike thing for a second there. Everybody said CrowdStrike, they took the fall for that. But in actual fact, my opinion, I could get chastised for this. Why did Microsoft OS allow that update to go onto their system? That's if it was nefarious, or if it was a risk that it was going to blue screen the
Yeah.
computers. That's a question I have. And this first question I have is, why did Microsoft allow it from a vendor OS perspective? And the second thing I have is, I talk to a lot of CISOs like yourself, and particularly in financial institutions, and most of them say, oh, we have sandboxed every update. So they say we don't blindly trust updates from our vendors, as in from Microsoft or CrowdStrike or Google or whoever, we're all the same. So we don't blindly trust them because we have live systems, and if they go down, we're in big trouble. But it happened.
Yep.
So I think a lot of people are just ticking boxes saying, oh, we have these procedures, and we write down the process, paste that, an update goes onto our system and whatever. I think AI could be used to pick that up as well.
Well, I think that's where the oversight from the government in the UAE is actually becoming much more stringent.
Yeah.
And actually, the tick box exercise of just having an external audit that comes in, kind of actually, you now have to validate to the central bank or or for me, the central bank.
Yeah.
How am I putting that control in place? How am I actually delivering the control that was expected? Not just making sure I tick a box, but actually in practice. And I think with PCI DSS version 4, the new standard, that's the same. I now have to explain how I'm delivering that control. It's not about just saying, yes, that control exists. Yes, I'm sandboxing every update. But actually, how are you doing that? Explain to me how you're doing that. And I think that is exactly
Show us your run book.
Correct. Yeah. That's exactly where we should be. We should be thinking live about how do we deliver these controls, not just making sure.
Well, I think that's what regulation.
That.
It needs to be. Unfortunately, it needs to be enforced, and that's why they do audits. And they do audits everywhere. They don't wait for the horse to bolt. They actually go and check you first. And that's where the financial industry is much more advanced than a lot of other industries. For example, healthcare. And I mean, you look at healthcare data; it's worth more than bloody credit card data.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Yeah. So they basically what we've been saying is that AI, generative AI, machine learning, we need to understand what they actually are. And the concepts of machine learning and AI, they're not new. They've been around for a long time. We're using them to this day, and we've been using them for years, since the games in 1980.
Yeah.
So I think what we need to make sure is that when we think about the use of generative AI, we need to understand where the data is going, what data is being used to teach any future models, and how we as humans, we as actually the control implementers, are actually delivering that effective control, not just saying, yes, we've got it, yes, we've done it. And I think that's about effective regulation of us as organizations and the use of generative AI.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I agree from a financial institution perspective, that's extremely important. If we look at it, just my aspect from a general, dealing with all the different verticals like, healthcare, finance, and, the usual government bodies as well. I think AI can be very, very beneficial for our day-to-day lives.
Yeah,
for sure. Like that example you made earlier on about the UAE pass. Excellent. So it can be really helpful for us all. And I think it does require a certain amount of regulation there as well. And then from, my own selfish perspective, from a cybersecurity point of view, it can certainly make jobs easier. But I think the lesson I would take from this conversation is, and one thing that will resonate with me, is what I've always had a little bit of skepticism about what you read on the internet.
Yeah.
So we need to not trust it 100%. We need to just say to ourselves, okay, where's that data coming from? Because it had to come from somewhere. So maybe it was created by a whole lot of BS, you know? So we don't know, it could be fake news. So we don't know. So we always have to be skeptical, and always the human should make the decision at the end of the day, whether this is right or wrong.
Absolutely.
Or cross. If you're doing an essay on, whatever topic you want, cross-check your facts. Go to a library at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Just make sure.
I'll make sure we'll send you to the library instead of just use it generally.
Yeah, right. Okay, thanks. That's it.